Did an alleged spy bypass security to get into the heart of the royal family? What were the biggest royal surprises of 2024? And is there any truth to the conspiracy theories around Harry and Meghan's Christmas card? There are some extraordinary things in today's show. Hello and welcome to Palace Confidential. I'm Jo Elvin and I've got a fantastic trio of experts to talk us through the big royal stories this week. First up, it's the Daily Mail's royal editor, Rebecca English. Then we have the Mail on Sunday's editor-at-large, Charlotte Griffiths. And in the middle there is, of course, the Daily Mail's diary editor, Richard Eden. Welcome to you all. Now, we also have a video from a very special guest in the form of a certain biographer of the King a little later on, so do watch out for that. Last week, I asked you if you could help us to break the 350,000 mark for the number of subscribers to the Daily Mail Royals YouTube channel, and you smashed it. I am drunk on the power. Drunk on the power. I ask and you do. Why stop there though? The more the merrier. So if you don't already, please do hit that subscribe button for more great royal videos. Right, let's get started. Now, a lot of you are unsurprisingly keen to know what is the truth behind claims that Prince Andrew befriended a man who has been accused of being a Chinese spy. Rebecca, it's a story that's been dominating headlines all this week. Is it even possible to give us a quick version of what that on earth is going on here?
I will try to do it in a nutshell, but it is complex. It basically involves a man called Yang Tengbo, known as Chris. He is the anglicised name he used, and basically he's a businessman who's lived and worked in this country for a long time and has a lot of links with government and establishment, but also strong links with Prince Andrew. He became one of the founders of his Pitchett Palace China branch of his initiatives, and basically a couple of years ago he was stopped and arrested by the security services and accused of being a spy. Now, he's fought that and insists he's a legitimate businessman. The case has gone to a tribunal.
That's what a spy would say.
There's no flies on you, Jo, is there?
Yeah.
I'd hate to be grilled by you, really grilled by you.
What do you mean? I do it every week.
He has fought that and has gone to the courts. He has now lost, and that case became public this week. And the reason why our Prince Andrew is involved in it is because it turns out when he was stopped by the security services, there was a letter and letters on his phone between himself, Prince Andrew, his advisors, which are unfortunate, to put it mildly.
Marvellous.
In which Andrew's senior advisor, a guy called Dominic Hampshire, who also happens to be a golf professional, saying to Tangbo, you are at the top of a tree that a lot of people would like to be at. Thank you for your advice in helping us to get people in and out of Royal Lodge that we don't want, the Royal Institution and the security services to know about.
It's a good look, isn't it?
It's not a great look, I have to say. It has resulted in a lot of things happening this week, I'm sure we'll go on to discuss.
Well, one question that I think a lot of people will want to know is how long will the rest of the royal family have known about this?
Well, of course, Prince Andrew, I should stress, says, look, I've done nothing wrong. I was introduced to this guy through official channels, and the minute I was told there was anything suspicious about his activities, I ceased all contact with him, and that was 2 years ago. When I asked Buckingham Palace how long they'd known about it, they said to me, we were told by the appropriate channels at the appropriate time, which I've taken to be around the same time that Andrew knew, so a couple of years.
Why? There's a lot of, all sort of like woeful roads seem to lead to Andrew.
And I think what we should assume from this, it will perhaps contextualise a lot of the attempts by the King in particular to sideline his brother and get him to downsize from royal. I think it will contextualise a lot of what we've seen happening in the last couple of years.
Okay, interesting. Now, Richard, there's a line in a letter from the alleged spy which describes Andrew as, quote unquote, in a desperate situation and will grab onto anything. That is pretty humiliating for a member of the royal family.
It really is, but it does highlight the position that Andrew's been put in because, as we know, the King has cut off his money and he has no other source of income. He's relied on income from his royal position for decades since leaving the Navy. And this makes him vulnerable. So it does highlight the dangers of this strategy of cutting him off. You know, he wants to carry on living in an expensive place which needs it needs funding to keep it restored and everything, and he wants money presumably to carry on living as he's accustomed, and he needs to get that from somewhere.
Well,
so I think it does highlight the dangers of this position that he's been put in.
There's a lot of murkiness here, because there's also the fact, isn't there, that he was taking a cut of deals for his Pitch at Palace project?
Yes, this is something which the Daily Mail and Mail on Sunday they'd uncovered a couple of years ago, that generally the point of Pitch at the Palace was to try to link budding entrepreneurs with investors. So it seemed like a very good thing, and they talked about how much success it had had really in linking finance to entrepreneurs. But then Andrew also started one in China, which did seem a bit odd, because then you thought, why are you sort of helping Chinese entrepreneurs? But the key thing was that Prince Andrew was getting a 2% cut from what we've been told. When the Mail reported this a couple of years ago, he and his people were keen to stress that it was all invested back into the project. It wasn't sort of creamed off for him, but it was all quite murky and awkward, I have to say.
Because my understanding was that it was a completely philanthropic pursuit.
No, it was a company. It was
right.
It was a business project. Yes, and remember he did this after being a trade envoy as well. So his view was he wants to help British business as much as possible. But he was getting
and I should
cut.
get paid for that. Yeah.
But I think you're right, Joe, is that a lot of people thought this was very altruistic.
That was my perception.
Yeah, and I think, rightly or wrongly, that you're right. That's what people thought it was, that it was philanthropic. And of course, let us not forget, this is what he started up after he had been downgraded as a trade ambassador, as a way to continue in a forward-facing public role as a working royal, and to also, I suppose, save his reputation after everything that happened before. And so ironically, X amount of years later, it's dragging him down again.
We're always talking about saving Andrew's reputation, aren't we? Always. But let's sort of like pivot to a bit of fairness, Charlotte, is that Andrew hasn't spoken, but his supporters might say that he wasn't the only senior establishment figure to have time with this alleged spy.
Yeah, I mean, it's not often that I support Prince Andrew, but I will say this for a bit of context. At the time, this alleged spy was meeting with David Cameron and Theresa May and George Osborne, the ex-chancellor. And he had pictures of these people on his desk, which we've now seen, they hit the papers. So if you were Andrew, you might think, well, why can't I meet this guy? Everybody else has. So I suppose in his defence, that's probably the only card he can probably play.
To be clear, Rebecca, the man accused of being the spy also denies the claims, doesn't he?
Yeah, and as I say, he's denied them since they were first put to him, and had actually gone to the British courts to seek to overturn the security services decision to bar him from this country, where he's actually spent probably half of his adult life and has set up, a home, businesses. He considered it kind of his place of residence. So he's fought it, and that's the only reason why we even know about this, because he's fought it and has lost, and has now decided to unmask himself, still shouting from the rooftops that you've got this all wrong.
I think we should point out, China is a totalitarian communist regime, and if you're senior there in business or whatever, dealing with other countries, you are expected to report back to the government. So
everyone's a spy?
Yes, if you're senior from China, so that you should assume, it should make Prince Andrew very careful, and everyone else, but that is the dangers of dealing with that sort of country.
What do you make of this, Richard? It's not often discussed, but it has been reported that until relatively recently, Andrew used to get military briefings from the Ministry of Defence, and obviously there's no suggestion that he passed sensitive information on, but it will raise eyebrows if that's true, won't it?
Yes, but to put that in context, he was receiving these briefings while he still had honorary roles with these regiments. This is before he stepped back from royal duties. So he was getting briefings from these regiments about what was going on, and that seemed right. And he took a close interest in his roles, and I think at the time he was respected for that. They were pleased to have someone who was really engaged.
Probably illegally important, I think, to point out. In his unusually he gave a statement on this issue, Andrew, and he made a point of saying, I did not pass on any sensitive information. So he claims that he would have never had a conversation with this man that would have imparted anything that was dangerous to this country. But I'm sure there are investigations going on behind the scenes to work out whether that's true or not. What,
in your view, is the role of advisors in this kind of situation? Who would have been advising Andrew on, you know, the company he keeps? Would it have been his personal? Would the king have had, or the queen at the time, have had any influence in who should be?
It's a really good question, Jo. Yeah, and that was part of the problem with Andrew, is that he kind of did operate as like a silo within the palace machinery. He wouldn't answer to the press office, he wouldn't answer to family members. You know, him and his team were kind of fiercely independent, and this has led to a lot of problems for them. And he chose, obviously, like all members of the royal family, you would have a private secretary that would have been a paid position that the monarchy would have paid for. But he also appointed his own senior advisors, and this Dominic Hampshire fellow is one of them. So we're not really sure whether he would have gone through any official palace vetting procedures, but obviously he feels emboldened to kind of write what he did on Andrew's behalf. And I have to say, there's a feeling a lot of what he was saying was quite spivvy. You know, it was kind of almost like a big sale for Andrew.
What does spivvy mean for our American viewers?
That's a very London phrase. It just means a bit wide boy.
Yeah.
You know.
What does that mean?
Yeah. We could be here all day.
I'm such a Londoner. I think I speak a different language to everyone.
Yeah.
Unofficial. It's
salesman-like.
unofficial. A bit of salesman-like.
Yeah.
You know, a little
Unregal, we could say.
I think that's a very good way of describing it.
Dignified.
Let's move on to Christmas. We're nearly there. So let's talk about what this means for Andrew at Christmas, because it seems that the main sanction placed on him is that he's not going to Sandringham. Is that right?
I know, and in the real world, I think probably some people are a bit like, so? But of course, and this is something the palace have had to think long and hard about, because they have taken every sanction they can against Andrew. He's been stripped of his royal duties, he's not allowed to use his HRH, you know, he's had his allowance withdrawn by the king, he's had his security pulled, so there's very little options open to them. And the reason why Christmas is so important is because obviously on Christmas Day at Sandringham we see all the royal family walk to church together, and it would have, I think the feeling was, it would have almost been seen at the height of a scandal of this magnitude engulfing him. If it appeared with the king, it was almost like the king putting his arm around him in public and saying, this is still my brother at the end of the day. And I think...
Which people would have understood, arguably?
Yes and no. I think it's not a good look for them. And I think even Andrew realised fairly quickly that was probably not a good idea. And, you know, I broke on the mail that he decided not to go. And then there was still the issue over the Christmas lunch today at Buckingham Palace, which is the pre-Christmas lunch they hold for around about 70 senior members and more junior members of the family to all get together. The people who don't make the cut to Sandringham, basically, because there's not enough room to squeeze them all in, and they have their own family commitments. And Andrew's dug his heels in a lot more over that, because his attitude was, this is my family and I should be entitled to see them at Christmas. And there is, I think, quite a degree of sympathy for that. But again, I think the feeling from the palace was, this is Buckingham Palace's monarchy HQ. And seeing Andrew again drive through the front gate, when behind the scenes, you know, there's a huge investigation going on into how much access he's given this alleged spy. We know he visited Buckingham Palace, St James's Palace, Windsor. You know, there's a huge investigation going on, and it just, again, was not the right optics.
And so do you have any information on who is at that Christmas lunch today?
Well, I can tell you now that William and Catherine, the children, aren't there. I should stress that is nothing to do with what's been happening this week, but the kids broke up from school quite early last week, and they just already made a decision as a family to go to Norfolk, and obviously, which is their kind of second home, and they're not going to travel back for it, but they will be at church on Christmas Day, and they'll see the family over Christmas. But apart from that, you do have kind of, you know, all of the junior royals, and it's a real jolly affair from what I hear. It's kind of Norfolk turkey, all the trimmings, crackers, bit of music, bit of entertainment. So a fun event for everyone. And to add to that, I think it's really important to note that while we've been recording the programme, we've seen the arrivals at Buckingham Palace, and amongst them are Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie with their husbands and their children. And I think the reason why that's important is the King, we know, is very fond of his nieces and has always been very keen to wrap his arms around them despite everything that's been going on with their father over recent years. So even though Andrew and Sarah aren't there today, I think it's very important that they are and they're included in the wider family gathering, even though the parents aren't there, and of course none of them will be there on Christmas Day at Sandringham.
Now, Richard, with this, you know, what I'll call the Andrew strategy around Christmas at Sandringham, you've written that in your column this week that you think that this situation seems to be the wrong way around. What do you mean by that?
Yes, I've written for a piece on Mail Plus, and I'm just making the point that you know, not allowing Andrew to spend Christmas with the royal family, because remember that he wouldn't need to appear, he wouldn't need to go to church on Christmas Day. He could still stay there. Sandringham's a private estate and he wouldn't be seen. But he's been seen as such an embarrassment that he can't you know, go anywhere near the royal family. But at the same time, he does still have some important roles. You know, he is still a counsellor of state, like Prince Harry. And what that means is they are 2 of 7 people who officially, they're legally entitled to stand in for the King if the King can't carry out his duties. Now, obviously we know they're not going to use them in a hurry, but having that legal role is extraordinary. And also remember, they are still in the line of succession. Prince Harry in 5th place, Prince Andrew in 8th. So, you know, on the one hand, he's such an embarrassment, he can't be seen any near the royal family. On the other hand, he could be king. You know, so in my view, they should be removed from the line of succession, and they should certainly straight away be removed as Counsellor of State. That's something the King can do with a memo to Parliament tomorrow.
But you'd still give him a turkey dinner?
Yeah.
At Sandringham?
Yeah, I think so, because you can love someone as your brother, but think, oh, you know, I'm annoyed with you or whatever, but Christmas is a time for family, and you can separate the two things. You know, one's work.
It's very complicated, isn't it?
One's family.
Families.
It's families. What can you do? Speaking of the wider family, Charlotte, some reports have suggested that Beatrice and Eugenie weren't planning on attending anyway.
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
Well, I have to say, one family that's extremely loyal to one another is the Yorks. They're very close, Fergie, Andrew and the 2 daughters. And so they've released a statement, Beatrice and Eugenie, saying, oh, well, we weren't going to be at Sandringham anyway. And if I was going to be a bit sceptical, which I always am, I think they probably were. I mean, they love the walkabout at Sandringham. It makes them look regal and part of the family, which they really enjoy, and it's really important to them. But probably I'm guessing, they released a statement to help slightly reduce the embarrassment on their father, who's obviously having to miss it. So to say, oh, the Yorks weren't going to go anyway, you know, it sort of buries him a little bit from the embarrassment.
I guess we'll never know. But
we'll
Richard,
never know.
I mean, part of the problem, isn't it, is that as you know, this another Prince Andrew story just dominates the headlines, and anything the rest of the royals do inevitably gets overlooked.
It really does. I mean, remember just last week we had Prince William talking about how much he was looking forward to sitting down with the extended royal family, and there were going to be 45 people there at lunch. Well, those numbers have dwindled rapidly, and actually
45 take 3, 4
take off, or quite a few more with the kids, you know. So those numbers are going down, and yes, that has dominated things, and that's why presumably all of the royal family are, you know, very disappointed with Prince Andrew. So it's unfortunate, and it detracts from the great work which so many of them do on a daily basis.
Although one thing that did cut through, Rebecca, was William having a go at being a TV presenter. What was that all about?
I thought this was interesting because it's something he never would have done a few years ago, and is definitely becoming more comfortable with doing, I would say. So it was on BBC One on Sunday. It was an hour-long programme about his Earthshot Awards and the progress as the finalists and the winners. And while the programme was presented by Hannah Waddingham, who's a real ambassador for Earthshot, you know, much loved, brilliant actress and performer, William was at the start of the show talking to camera out on location, saying, you know, this is my passion project, this is what it's all about, we want you to know about it. And it just occurred to me that this was something he's now starting to do a lot more, appearing on podcasts, you know, Catherine with her video messages this year, talking to people personally, the video they put out in autumn. I just think it's a sign of how much the Wales' approach to telling their story is changing.
Sometimes I wonder if, there's a part of William that was sometimes envious of Harry's more, affable and ability to be able to do that kind of like cheeky, fun thing. Do you think he ever was a bit, wished that he was a bit more like that?
I don't know, but I've definitely seen a chat. I mean, don't forget, he did a skit for Comic Relief a few years ago, and I remember someone saying to me he was really nervous about doing that because it was a bit of a departure from. He did a take on the kind of Blackadder comedy thing, and they were quite nervous about how that went down. So I think he was quite relieved that actually it was done quite classily and people react to do it quite well. And he is, when you see him, he's definitely much more confident in his interactions with people, public speaking. I mean, that's inevitable as you get older.
Just happens as you get older, doesn't it?
Exactly.
I'm still waiting, but
yeah, me too.
What do you think, Charlotte? Would you like to see William do more of this sort of thing, or just stay in the buttoned-up royal lane, as it were?
No, he's the new modern royal. He's the future king, and he has got a jocular side to him that's quite natural, and definitely doesn't feel like he's forcing it. He can be a bit silly. He threw a dart with Hannah Waddingham and missed the board by miles. And,
do you think that might have been the first time that Prince William has ever thrown a dart?
Yeah, no, probably was. But you could tell that when he laughed, he was like, I'm sort of royal, don't really go down the pub and play darts that often. He kind of gets his own joke. He's in on his own kind of humour, which it really comes through as natural, I think.
And I think, of course, he could have had that cut from it quite easily. It was not live, but he decided, actually, I'm going to put it out there, and was quite happy to take the mickey out of himself.
Well, I would say it was less cringe-making than Prince Harry's recent skit with when he was pretending to have a tattoo inked on him by the American singer Jelly Roll.
It feels less forced, because the thing is about Harry in the old days is he would make jokes on camera and they'd feel like, that's probably what he's like. But these days, as I said last week, these days they feel forced. Harry's
more scripted,
jokes. Yeah, more scripted. But with William, it didn't feel scripted. He just... Of course, when he was speaking face to camera, it was scripted, but he was quite natural with that as well. I think I like it. I like it for him.
Hannah Waddingham's really good at getting the best out of people as well, isn't she?
They
had banter and almost flirtatiousness, dare I say.
Yeah, she's awesome. Well, do you know what? We've got a royal Christmas present for you next week, courtesy of the Daily Mail Royals channel, and I'll leave it to our very own Richard Eden to explain.
In this special festive episode of Reading the Royals, I'll take you inside the drama, delights and secrets of the annual Christmas gathering and reveal what really goes on behind the doors at Sandringham. From festive feuds to heartwarming moments, the Royals' holiday season is full of surprises.
Well, that new episode of Reading the Royals will be out next Monday, so look out for that. And if you want more Richard Eden in a tuxedo, he has dressed up again for a very special Christmas episode of Palace Confidential, where he and Rebecca answer our viewers' questions, and that is out next Thursday. Well, let's hear some of your comments now, and we'll stay with Andrew for a moment. We've had an ongoing discussion these past few weeks about whether Andrew should devote his time now to looking after rescue horses. But Karki Berry raises an important question. She asks, if Andrew rescued animals, who would pay for their upkeep? That's quite a good point, really, Rebecca, isn't it?
And this is a big problem for Andrew, where he gets his money from.
Oh, no, not this again.
Yeah, I know. I feel like I'm boring myself now.
Yeah, so that's, I don't know.
Horses are expensive to keep up, aren't they?
Very, very expensive. And
almost as expensive as 15 room
30 bedroom
30
Oh, I'm sorry, gosh.
30 room, 10 bedrooms.
My tiny brain can't comprehend how
something
big
so
Royal
big,
Lodge is. Well, after our discussion of Catherine's carol concert last week, now do check that show out after this if you missed it. Vicky had an interesting point. Prince Louis fixing his tie walking into the church was his dad's move, showing his maturity. So cute. Well, here's that again. We think you might be up to something. And Charlotte revealed last week that Harry was trying to win back fans by returning to his cheeky persona. And a number of you said that you would not be fooled by this, like KCJ Summers, who said, hang on, H is 40 plus years old and you're talking about him wanting to be cheeky again. That ship has sailed. After Spare, we now know too much. He's trashed his own image. Oh, that's harsh, isn't it?
I'm not sure it is, to be honest.
I'm saying nothing.
Accurate. Not harsh.
Oh, Oh, well, they're in a feisty mood today, this lot. Well, let's go back to my panel now and to a Christmas card that has got the internet conspiracy theorists working overtime, not to mention this panel. Charlotte, what Christmas card? Tell us everything. What did you make of it?
So Meghan and Harry released from California their Christmas card, their holiday card, and it had lovely scenes from their year, including their royal tour, their semi-royal tour to Colombia.
It's not a royal tour. They're not a royal tour.
Semi-royal tour. Was it a pseudo-royal tour?
Yeah.
And lovely scenes of their good work, but also a scene of them greeting their kids outside, presumably in California. Harry's kneeling down with his arms outstretched, and Meghan's got her arm outstretched. And the conspiracy theories were noticing that her arm seemed extremely long, but I have to say I don't agree with that one. Her arm just seemed normal to me. The dog is in the background, a black Labrador. The dog appears to only have 3 legs, so people were wondering whether that...
3-legged dogs do exist.
Well, yeah, I don't know if actually has 3 legs, but
yeah.
of course it's a bit, like the Kate time. People are desperate to see whether photoshopping has gone on. I actually have to say, and I love a conspiracy, so I'm very disappointed to reveal this, I don't think that she attached her own arm on or removed one of the dog's legs. I think it is a real photo, I have to say.
Okay, Richard, some people have suggested that the picture of Harry with his arms outstretched was staged to look like a famous one of him and his mother.
Yes,
what do you make of that?
Well, it certainly looks like a stage picture, because why else would someone be taking photos of some sort of reunion between parents and children? I don't know if it was after they returned from one of their trips or something.
I don't know. I think, you that age, just sort of like kids running around. Come over here.
No, the actual point is they're in their garden. Who was taking pictures of them meeting their kids in the garden?
Yeah, it's definitely staged, but also, yes, there were it evoked clear memory, it certainly did for me, of that beautiful images of Princess Diana greeting her sons. It was taken in Canada back in, I think it was 1991, where I think the boys were joining their parents for the tour in Canada. And she was obviously thrilled to see them after some time. And they were pictures that really sort of captured Diana at her most natural and her most loving. And also it was seen as very symbolic because, rather than the sort of formal, stiff royals we were used to, here was Diana as the very open mother. And so I don't know if it was deliberate or not with this, but it was definitely reminiscent of that. Remember, people have been asking, why haven't you been analysing this in the same way as you did with the image of Catherine and family? But remember what happened was because that was released through the picture agencies, and then they didn't feel they could distribute it because it had been digitally altered and that sort of thing. But this hasn't happened here. The reason we know about this card is because Omid Scobie, you might remember him. He's that old lapdog of the Sussex. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't say that. That great journalist Omid Scobie. I think he was boasting that he'd received this card, so he put it online. So that's the only reason why we've seen it.
But with the Catherine photo, you were able to zoom in. It was a very high quality photo, so it was quite easy to zoom in. That's what all the conspiracy theorists did, to see whether it had been photoshopped. And of course, sure enough, when you blow it up, you could tell it had been.
Plus the metadata.
And the metadata, yeah. Whereas this one, it's too hard to do because the photo itself is quite small within the card. It's like an inch wide. So the conspiracy theories hunting for a Photoshop haven't been successful.
Rebecca, there's no reason for them to release an original image on this case, is there?
Yeah, look, I am the least technical person, I think, probably in this building.
That is true. I can vouch for that. Yeah.
So I am almost the worst person to ask about this, because actually, to me, as a layman, it looks like such a bad, blurry picture that I don't see how anyone could personally tell anything from it. It almost seemed a bit pointless to release such a bad picture in a way, because you can't really see them properly. It's all very blurred.
Well, that's like Charlotte says, it was just one of several images on this card.
I must be just so innocent of mind. I just think, in my mind it was like, oh, it won't matter, it's only small, so it doesn't have to be the best quality. It's a sweet picture, let's bung it on our Christmas card.
I have to say,
wrong? Is there something wrong with me?
I just don't think Meghan and Harry bung anything on anything.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
they think
I
when it
agree
comes
with
to their
you,
image,
Charlotte,
they
yeah.
meticulously plan things. I wouldn't be surprised if they booked a photographer to come to their garden to film them greeting their child and
please take some blurry pictures of us.
They seem very strategic, so I don't know, to me it seemed planned.
I was going to say, the thing that really struck me about it was it's a Christmas card with no mention of Christmas. This is Prince Harry, whose father is Supreme Governor of the Church of England and the Anglican Communion worldwide, and no mention of Christmas, just, happy holidays.
But he's American now. He's said happy holidays on his card for years, I have to say.
But I think there's lots of Americans who wish each other happy Christmas, aren't there?
Oh, no, I thought...
I'm sure they'll tell us.
Yeah.
I'm sure they will.
And don't forget, it was their work Christmas card. They will also send out personal ones as well. So this would be sent out to kind of everyone on their mailing list, I suppose. I mean, Richard makes a good point, and I know there was a lot of pushback as to why the media wrote so much about the issue about Catherine and the Mother's Day card this year, and I think I tried to explain at the time. It's that the use of photo digital manipulation and AI is a big issue for the news industry here. There's grave concern about the way it's creeping in. So these picture agencies aren't allowed to put out pictures that have been digitally manipulated at all. I mean, it's against all the rules and regulations. And as Richard rightly says, the difference is with this one, it's just been put out, sent by friends, by them to, friends and business associates. But
yes, if you distribute a card through a news agency, it's a public record.
Yeah, exactly. And this is not. But I suppose, and I do understand why people saying we see them and their family so little. I suppose it's the only public record that people have got.
Yeah.
And what's sauce for the goose, etc. etc. And obviously, Harry and Meghan, particularly Harry, put themselves up there as kind of commissioners against misinformation, and if it has been digitally altered, is that hypocritical? And I get all that. It's just I think it's a very bad photograph.
I just hope we see that dog again so we can establish whether it does have 3 legs or not.
I'm very concerned about that, and I very much look forward to what is sure to be fire in the comments this week on this. I can't wait.
Well, I think it's probably also worth noting that while Harry and Meghan made a point of saying season's greetings, William and Catherine have said Happy Christmas to people on their Christmas card this year. We've seen it today, it's been released on social media. And I think what's lovely about it is it shows, it's not a new picture of them and the children, but it is a scene taken from that video they shot in Norfolk over the summer by Will War. And so I think that gives a real message of positivity at the end of a difficult year, that this is the moment they would like to encapsulate how they're ending it.
But Charlotte, there were more slings coming for the Sussexes in an article for The Cut.
Yeah, so The Cut was the magazine that I think about 2 years ago in 2022 did that beautiful cover of Meghan.
That's right, yes.
Amazing, actually, to be honest. And it was a deep dive, in-depth interview with her, and it was fairly flattering, although later on some stories leaked out about how Meghan had been quite difficult to work with during that. So there was a sense that maybe her relationship with The Cut had soured. And then this week we discovered it definitely has soured, because The Cut said, why do all of Meghan and Harry's projects keep flopping? And then they did a deep dive into the Polo documentary and whether or not the cookery show is going well behind the scenes with Netflix, and basically speculated that their next TV project might be the final one for Netflix. And the reason why it was surprising was because The Cut was her chosen magazine that she decided to do this big reveal in 2 years ago. And so for a magazine to change their, to change their opinion of her so quickly is kind of surprising, I think.
Richard, your colleague Amanda Platel points out that as they're having that sort of faltering a bit in these projects, that Catherine was nominated for Time Magazine's Person of the Year.
Yes, I think a lot of that is sympathy because of the year that she's had. But I think what this year has emphasised is, because of Catherine not being able to carry out many public engagements, it's emphasised how much she's missed and how important she is to the royal family. So they're certainly right to highlight how she is one of the women of the year, I'd say.
Meghan would have been really jealous. Do you think? Yeah, she'd love to be nominated for Time Women of the Year.
Well, we've had lots of briefing that 2025 is going to be Meghan's year. So we
really
can,
now?
Okay, we're nearly there, so we can find out sooner rather than later. Well, Mail columnist and royal commentator Robert Hardman recently updated his biography of the King, and in it was lots of new information and insight into the latest goings-on in regal circles. Here he brings us his key moments of 2024.
So, lows, highs and surprises of 2024 for the royal family. Let's start with the lows. Clearly, at the top of the list has to be those twin cancer diagnoses. We got the news in February that the King was undergoing treatment for cancer, and then that remarkable video message from the Princess of Wales in the following month in March, saying that she too was undergoing treatment for cancer. That's one of the lowest points, I would say, for the monarchy in many years. These are personal challenges entirely beyond their control. Put together, that was just a terrible few weeks for everybody concerned. Another low point, obviously, for the monarchy as a whole, for the King in particular, has been what you might call the difficult dukes. Less so the Duke of Sussex. Yes, there have been plenty of noises from California, but on the whole, he's kept a relatively low profile this year. The Duke of York, on the other hand, has been a repeated source of tension, strain and embarrassment, culminating in late summer with the King cutting off Prince Andrew's allowance. So that's definitely been a recurring low. And low point number 3, well, I would say it was the news that came through towards the end of June that the Princess Royal had been suddenly admitted to hospital, having been knocked, kicked, we're not quite sure, unconscious by a horse at her Gloucestershire home, Gatcombe Park. She had very severe concussion. To this day, she can't really remember what happened. But given what a stalwart, what a trooper she has been all through this year, how she, along with Queen Camilla and the Prince of Wales, you know, they've been the sort of backbone of the royal family, while the King and the Princess of Wales have been ill. I think the prospect of having the Princess Royal out of action for a long time was a very bleak one indeed. In typical fashion, she was back in action a fortnight later, needless to say, it's an equestrian event, but that really was a worrying moment. So I would say those are my 3 lows of the year. Let's turn to the highs. And yes, amid all the doom and gloom, there's been plenty of upbeat, often heartwarming moments. I think number 1 was the response, just the overwhelming public response to the illnesses of both the King and the Princess. I would look to that wonderful scene of the King going through all the cards, sackfuls of cards that he received following the news that he had cancer. And there's one in particular which I love, and actually I've stuck it in my new edition of my book, my biography of the King, and that is him opening this enormous card, and there's a dog with one of those healing cones, those sort of plastic cones they put around dogs to stop gnawing their wounds, saying, well, at least you don't have to wear one of these. And he found that absolutely hilarious. Tears of laughter, I was told by one of those who was present. That was one of the highs, the public response. And then, of course, to the Princess. I mean, it goes without saying, the global outpouring of affection for her. So that's one of the highs. I think on a more personal level, for the King, number 2, D-Day, the beaches of Normandy, June the 6th, 2024, the 80th anniversary of the Normandy landings, the amphibious landing that really changed the course of world history. He wanted to be there. He was there with the surviving veterans, with the French President, Emmanuel Macron. They were on the beach at the magnificent Normandy Memorial, which many Daily Mail readers have very generously helped to build. And there he was with the veterans, overlooking the beaches where it happened, and he outstayed the official time he was supposed to be there by well over an hour. He absolutely loved it. He loved meeting the veterans, so did Queen Camilla. The veterans loved meeting them. It was just a very happy day. It was like a reset moment for the monarchy, I think. And another high point, number 3, I would say, be the King's tour down under. He went off to the Pacific, he went to the Commonwealth Summit in Samoa, and just before that he went to Australia. His first long-distance trip of the reign, really, and certainly the first major trip since his diagnosis. And contrary to a lot of expectations that Australia was going to be awash with republicanism, with the exception of one extraordinary shouty moment in Parliament where an activist MP started heckling and got bundled out. The overall welcome was very warm. There was a real sense, actually, that Australia, a country which the King adores, having spent part of his school years there, that is a reciprocal feeling, and there is no sense of any urgency to dispose of the Crown down under anytime soon. So I think that was another high. So let's turn to the surprises of 2024. There are always a few. There certainly have been this year. One that sticks in my mind back in May of 2024, when we had the first unveiling of the first major official portrait of the king by the well-known portrait artist Jonathan Yeo, and he had produced this remarkable and slightly controversial portrait of the king, where you had the king in his scarlet tunic as colonel of the Welsh Guards, but the whole image had sort of bled into a sea of red. Yeo had painted the whole thing kind of red, and in the middle of this sea of red, there was the king's face. He was quite impressed by it, and the Queen certainly liked it. She said, "You've got him." So I think that was a thumbs up from the palace. That was one surprise. Another one was the fact that the king, through this difficult year, has been falling back on the writings of a fairly obscure Russian Orthodox monk called St. Silouan. I found this out while I was writing the biography, that that there is a well-thumbed copy of the sayings of St. Silouan in the king's little private chapel at Highgrove. St. Silouan is not the happiest of souls. One of his watchwords was, "Keep your mind in hell and do not despair." So that's what's been keeping up the royal spirits this year. Thank you, St. Silouan. Another surprise, I think, was the rapport, the obvious rapport between President-elect Donald Trump and the royal family. We saw that in Paris towards the end of the year, when both President-elect Trump and the Prince of Wales both went to mark the reopening of the Cathedral of Notre Dame after the fire. And the President-elect took it as an opportunity to drop round to the British Embassy to have a chat with Prince William. And I think at a time when everyone in Britain is rather fearful of the pretty cool relationship between the new British government of Sir Keir Starmer and the incoming administration in Washington, here were signs of a transatlantic alliance that has rather deeper roots and rather more promise. So I think that was a pleasant surprise. Another surprise, who would have thought the Duke of York would be hanging out with a Chinese spy? I think it's safe to say that took everybody a little by surprise. And well, there's been several others, but let's close on a happy one. I discovered the king has appointed an official cocktail maker at state banquets. These days at state banquets, he's shaved off one of the courses to make them quicker, but the guests now get a special state visit themed cocktail in the colours of the visitor's flag. So a new strand to the palace hospitality machine. So a year of ups, downs, surprises as ever. Who knows what 2025 will bring.
Robert Hardman there, and a reminder that Robert's updated version of Charles III is out now. And for our American viewers, here is a picture of what that cover looks like. Rebecca, can you possibly pick a royal highlight from 2024?
I wish you'd warned me about this question, Jo.
I would love to put you on the spot.
I would have had a thought. I suppose for me actually was being able to cover the King and the Queen and William on their big tours to Australia, Samoa and Cape Town, especially coming after the year that they'd had. Just seeing the King's joy, being back out on the road, shaking hands, talking people, the warmth of the welcome. You could see the relief in Queen Camilla's eyes that they were able to do that. And I mean, obviously I wrote about it in the Mail at the time, but the genuine confidence it gave me seeing William in South Africa, and how I knew there's no way he would have gone on that trip if they hadn't have been in a much happier place. And you kind of take that back to that moment in January. And I remember sitting there at my desk, and the news came through that the King was in hospital for that benign prostate condition, and that was shocking enough. And then hours later being told that Catherine was in at the same time, and then those punches just kept on rolling for them as a family. First the King's cancer diagnosis, and this is something I'll be writing about in the Mail in the next few days, and then Catherine's. I mean, this year should have been for them the year that they got back to normal after the death of, or after COVID, the death of the late Duke of Edinburgh, the death of Queen Elizabeth, then the kind of full-on nature of the coronation. And this was the year that it was just going to be back to a normal year again. And before the end of the first month, every plan had been ripped up. And even though the King was told, look, its early stages and it's very manageable. Cancer's it's viciously unpredictable. You don't know where it's going to take you. So to see them so much happier at the end of this year, I think that for me was a real highlight.
I mean, tumultuous doesn't even seem like a big enough word, does it? Same question to you. Highlight for 2024?
For me, it was definitely Trooping the Colour, which, you know, is always a joyful occasion, often on a sunny day. But this year, you know, it was the return of Catherine after cancer treatment, and just that joy in seeing her looking, you know, relatively healthy again and back as part of the royal family was a real sense of relief among a lot of us, I think.
I think you're right. I think a lot of the country felt like that. Charlotte, you know what I'm going to ask. Highlight.
Well, I actually feel the relief came when she released her video, and I know it got a bit of, you know, stick from some people, said it was a bit cheesy, but I didn't feel that relieved by her appearance at Trooping the Colour. I thought she was amazing for doing it and so brave, but didn't look that completely well. But then by the time we saw the video, she was jumping about in the woods and driving her Defender, and it obviously was a very vigorous shoot and took quite a lot of effort to do. So it was very, very reassuring to see that, and I thought, phew, she's out of the woods. And of course, that was the symbolism of the whole video as well, the woods.
And when you think about it, I remember when 5 years ago, I think we started the show, can you believe it? And a couple of people would say to me, you know, is there really enough to talk about for the royals every week? Look at, I mean, it just never stops. It's relentless, the amount of news. What do you think will be the big headlines next year? What's the direction for 2025 for the family?
I think if there's one thing this year has shown us, and that's it's better not to predict the future, frankly. I'm sure there'll be lots for us.
Get out.
There'll be lots for us to
Yeah,
talk about
that's
either way.
true. Yeah.
I think hopefully we'll see more of Catherine. That's what I'm hoping for 2025. See her out and about being our glamorous future queen again.
Indeed.
There's a lot more trips I know that's coming up, and I really hope, given what I said a few minutes ago, that next year will be the year that they get more back to normal, because I think they deserve to cut a break after the last few years. And what about you, Jo? What was kind of your highlight, would you say?
Honestly, I think the thing that genuinely moved me was the report of Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, meeting with the victims of war crimes, the sexual violence. I very much admire her and Camilla for taking on those, you know, very unglamorous causes that need amplification. So I thought that was amazing.
Yeah, well, I might have some more in the coming weeks to tell you about Sophie.
Well,
so
incredible.
That will keep you happy.
And this cues us up very nicely now, because it is that time again for yet another unsung royal hero of the week. And I believe, Rebecca, you have a nomination. Tell us who and why.
I do, and I can't believe I'm quite saying this, but Fergie. Sarah, the Duchess of York.
She has had a busy week.
I was not expecting that.
Has saved Christmas, has literally saved Christmas for the royal family. So we spoke a lot earlier on about Prince Andrew and his travails and the sanction that's been taken against him. But if it hadn't have been for his ex-wife having a quiet word in his ear, I think we might still be waiting to find out what happened, what was going to be happening over Christmas, even as this programme airs. So I've been told by both sides of, sources on both sides of the fence, that she has been instrumental in just being a kind of small, still voice of calm in her dealings with her ex-husband. And I've been told that the King does understand it's a very delicate situation. She has been very loyal to Andrew through all his difficulties over the years, but it was also, actually, to be fair to her, been respectful to the King, the Queen, and also the late Queen Elizabeth, and has made no secret of admiration for her. So I think they very much appreciate and are grateful for her saying to Andrew, look, why don't we just take a step back this year and see where the future lies. So,
to your earlier point, Richard, that nothing's predictable. Can you imagine in the 90s having said something like that about Fergie saving Christmas,
saving Christmas, saving the day, the royal family being grateful to her.
Well, it sounds
exactly.
like they're going to be spending Christmas together on their own, like the couple that they used to be. So maybe it's about time they got married again.
She said in an interview this weekend, last weekend, that Andrew's a very sad man, and I thought that was really touching as well, because she's going to spend her Christmas alone without her daughters. just with Andrew, just out of pure loyalty to the man
From
and
what
to the
I know
crown.
of Fergie, I bet you she's got plans to liven it up a bit.
Maybe a few neighbours will be invited.
And someone's got to take one for the team, haven't they? So
Yeah, but that's the thing. She's so take one for the team, isn't she, Fergie?
She's taken a lot for the team.
Yeah,
over the years.
bless her.
Well, speaking of Christmas, with the big day fast approaching, we wanted to share some brilliant pictures of royals past and present enjoying their festivities. Well, if you weren't in the Christmas spirit yet, then surely that would have just tipped you well over the edge. Well, I've got terrible news. This is our last regular show for a couple of weeks, but in brilliant news, we do have 2 special Palace shows coming up and an episode of Reading the Royals over the next couple of weeks for you to look forward to. It's just time now to wish you and your loved ones a very Merry Christmas from all of us here at Palace Confidential, and we will see you very soon. Bye for now.